I would love, even though we just sat down, I would love for us to stand up because I want to see who my audience is, okay? So we can all stand up. And when I ask a question, and if this applies to you, I want you to sit down. If you have been programming in Go, or you haven't started but you intend to start, thank you very much. Sit down. Okay, can't tell. All right, just going to take a mental note here. If you've been programming in Go for less than 6 months, sit down. If you have been programming in Go for a year or less, sit down. If you've been programming in Go for 2 years or less, sit down. 3 years or less, sit down. We have some, okay? 4 years or less, sit down. That would be 2015. 5 years, starting in 2014. So 1-4, pre-1-5, or sit down. Okay, I get to call you OGs, which are these are the OGs. 6 years, sit down. 2 standing, 3 standing, 4 standing, 5 standing. 7 years, sit down. Okay? So that's 2013. So you were in Go 2012 or before, pre 1.0. 09, or when the RCs were 60. Awesome. So, sorry, I hit you. Thank you for that. All right. Yeah, I think so. Van's in charge of the plushies. I did that exercise, one, to honor the people who have been with Go for a very long time, but also to make a point about 10 years of Go and who our audience is. So we hear that in this meetup, half of you, maybe now we can just, instead of standing up, we can work out our arms. Raise your hand if this is your first ever LondonGophers meetup. That's a sizable population, right? So here we are with people who have varying understanding of both Go as a programming language, Go, the London community, Go, the ecosystem. And I think when a language comes of age, as we have in this 10th year, we have to be increasingly aware of a greater and greater audience. And that audience is including people who have never programmed in Go but will. I look forward to you. Welcome. And people who have been programming in Go for a very long time, and everybody in between. And in order to try to grapple our head of how to serve the very many different needs of all these audiences, last week for our birthday, we gave ourselves a present, and we gave a present to all of you, and that present was go.dev. How many of you have had a chance to play with go.dev or see go.dev? Raise your hand. Okay, great. So we have 2 sites now. We have Golangorg, where it has the language spec and has our white papers and sort of the authoritative technical things on all things Go, including contribution guidelines. And then we have this new thing. And so there's a lot of questions out there. And I wanted to take this time to maybe take you around, maybe behind the scenes, how the sausage got made, as much as I can tell you. And then also take some questions from the audience about this, okay? The other thing I wanted to ask, and I think I'm going to have you continue to do some exercises here. How many of you have contributed to the Go code base? Contributed. Great. Thank you. How many of you are involved in organizing Go events or meetups, conferences? So London organizers probably. How many of you have taught workshops in Go? Bill, if you don't raise your hand, thank you. For those of you who are new and would like to know, I'm going to give a plug to Bill. Bill is part of Arden Labs. Over the last 5 years, he's done more than 400 workshops for companies. And so he is one of our first and probably our premier trainer, at least most widely known across the world. And so if your company needs Arden Lab services, I'm sending you over to him. If you're also wanting to get more people involved from underrepresented groups, also go to Bill. Anyway, the last thing I wanted to ask, and this is an interesting question, is how many of you are that lone developer that loves Go that's trying to convince your manager or your technical leadership to use Go? Hands higher, please. Okay. So I asked you all these questions because this is the new frontier for Go, right? For us to think about for the next decade. We have heard it time and time again, how do I convince my manager? I love it, right? Or how can I get the rest of my team to switch from X language to Go, right? Or how can I have some sort of, right, exactly. Could be Java, but we see a lot of Python people as well. And that is the purpose, I would say, of go.dev. But there's more. But wait, there's more. So you see here at the top, there's tabs. How many of you are package authors or maintainers of third-party Go libraries? Thank you. Thank you very much. So, as you know, or if you've come to this, if you don't know, I'll kind of give a brief history. We've had an interesting journey with dependency management for Go. And it's interesting to reflect on that dependency management story because Go was developed at Google, and Google is famously a monorepo. And it used Bazel or Blaze, and it didn't really have to worry about a thing. And so that was an omission from the start. Whereas we've heard in other languages, like Cargo, that came right out of the gate, we didn't have that solution. But we came up with a solution eventually, and that solution now is modules. So now I'm going to have more hands raised, and I'm going to try to remember all of this because this is going to go back in a trip report to the Go team. How many of you are now adopting modules? Oh, wow, like that was the angelic choir. That was amazing. Okay, so I think the thing is, this is not the case. You are probably the vanguard for this kind of transitory state that we're in. There are still some people that, for whatever reason, have not yet done that. And so we really wanted to offer the ability to get people to evaluate Go as a whole solutions project. So I'm going to try and do this with my head craned and interesting hand-eye coordination. But each of these tabs describes something that I just mentioned, right? So you have solutions. And solutions is to show to your management, right? Or to show to your leadership. What is Go good for, right? But also, we're very much trend followers, and some of us are trendsetters, but we sometimes look left and right. Who's using which testing framework? Let's use it. Who else is using Go out there, and how are they using Go? Let's read about it, right? And that's typically how we've worked as an industry for a very long time. Because sometimes we can't, we have a business problem and we just want to know how did somebody else solve it and can we learn lessons from them. And so that's this page right here for solutions. Learn. So Learn has a lot that we're going to work on. But how many of you have found that you had a lone developer journey in learning Go? You had to learn it on your own. How many of you wish that you could have learned it maybe in a workshop group or with a team? So we're really looking at the literature and the research out there for how people learn, and it is as wide and individualized as the people in this room. But what we're finding is that teams and learning within the context of teams and in person has the best outcomes for most people. And so what we hope to gain is to give give groups of varying abilities to learn Go together as a team, but also to eventually provide training resources for companies to learn maybe in as they're learning together to be able to do it. So scaling training at the company level or giving the choice at the individual level. There's also one last one that I'm quite proud of, and that is Codecademy. Go has been infamous, at least in this last 10 years. I've had a lot of people come up to me and say, I don't know how to code at all. And I hear that you know how to code. Can I learn how to code in Go? And how many of you have taught a complete beginner from Go? Kudos to you. Because most of our training partners do not. They assume some level of proficiency in one language, and they assume Go is going to be the second or third or nth language that you're going to learn. And we wanted to, in the second decade, be more inclusive that way. And so we included that in the Learn page. And we really look forward to having more training partners and growing this with many learning audiences and many skill levels and many modalities in mind. The third one up here is the Explorer. And this is where I'm going to spend a little bit of my time on for those that are working with Go day to day. So one of the things that modules brought, in addition to saying Semver is a lie, no, I'm kidding. In addition to getting people to rethink how we're packaging up software as a new logical unit outside of version control systems, is the idea that part of your learning and evaluating a language in a company is learning if there are good packages out there. And Go, historically, over the last decade, has had to walk a fine line. Most of you in the testing quiz that Steve and Salman gave show that all of us are kind of still doing the native approach. We're kind of, maybe it's because that's just the Go way, right? But what we're also finding is that we can't continue to do the Go way if we want to bring in people from other language ecosystems who are used to these kinds of things. And so in the same way, GoDoc, I'm losing the thread of the thought. So Go, because it had one way to do things and a simple way to do things, would often get people in our issue repository or people from companies saying, why don't you have either some third-party library that has been ported over from their language of choice? Why don't you have generics? Very big one that we get, right? And we keep having to rinse and repeat. It's typically Ian Lance Taylor doing the bulk of the work in the issue repo saying, that's not something that we choose to do for Go, but please feel free to write a third-party package for that, right? And I'll take a little bit of a side note. I've had some people come up to me and say, don't they understand that this is going to be table stakes for an enterprise language? To which we simply say, we want to keep Go, Go. And so it's a way for us to balance that out. And so that is this package.go.dev. It is a documentation server that is module aware, and that is going to show sort of the best of what I would call the last piece of the puzzle in the modules toolchain. Maybe you have heard in previous meetups, but we've really matured the toolchain over the last 18 months. We've added the proxy Golang earlier this year. We had the sum and the index DB, right, or the mirror. And this was the last piece of the puzzle because godoc.org was not module aware. So I'm just going to go and feature, is this Logos? Something like this. So you want to evaluate a logging package, and Go, Ian Lance Taylor has probably told you in one of the last 7 or 8 years that we're not going to choose to add that beyond what we already have in the standard library, probably for compatibility reasons or other very, very well thought out reasons. We are not doing it to be mean. So please go evaluate a logging package, and you just don't know where to go. In the past, we've had Awesome Go and Curated Go and other tools for us to evaluate. Sometimes we use signals like the amount of GitHub stars that are out there, right? Or what our cousin's brother's dog decided to use and worked well for them at their company. But all of these are really kind of not, we really want to find out more about it. And sometimes it's whether we want to evaluate it, but also what happens when we want to update it or we want to use it or we're evaluating it as we're refactoring or porting a system. And so here's what we have. I'm going to just show up the top. My goodness. So right, we have an overview. So you have the doc. The doc is typically what you would find in go.org. This is also something that you would find in the version control. This is giving, whether it's from GitHub or self-hosted repository. It could be something outside of Git because people are still using Bitbucket and SourceForge, believe it or not. So this is there. So yeah, here are the subdirectories. This is pretty standard. This is where I really want to kind of bring it to your attention. So these are module versions that have been tagged and released in your project. So this is really where we're starting to normalize, and since most of the people who have adopted modules here have already understand, we've normalized tagging your release and making sure. And I think that is huge to get an entire ecosystem to normalize a thing and a new habit to do. And I think this is going to get us there. This also under the hood works with the proxy, so you're going to find that if you're not hitting the proxy or if you're not tagging in your version control site or system or hosted, I keep saying Git because I think okay, raise your hand if you're not using Git. Let's do a thing here. Okay. So So we have one person using SourceForge. No, I'm kidding. But this is where you're going to see it, and you might see some skews. I urge you, if you're seeing any skews, to maybe tag or release or write in and give a feedback, because we want to make sure that we covered all the edge cases. Right. So here's your imports. So this is where you kind of can understand where your dependencies are getting their dependencies, your transient dependencies, right? Yeah. Both within the standard library and there. And then imported by. So this is also where we're looking left and we're looking right, and we're going to say, oh, so-and-so uses this. It must be good enough for them. It could be good for, or it can also create conversations, right? Oh, we tend to be kind of a small world. And they'll say, I know the engineer over at that company, and I'm going to ask them X, Y, Z. And so I think this is really good, and it gives us a comprehensive way for us to see how people are using it and who's using it, right? And then, of course, we have licenses. So this is interesting, and I'm going to get right off the bat for the AMA. One of the biggest things that we've had so far in our feedback button when you give feedback is about licenses, because we have certain algorithms to detect a license, and sometimes people are modifying the license and it's not picking it up. People are getting angry. But the other thing that is probably super keeping our lawyers at Google really busy right now is the idea of licenses with intransient dependencies. So this is only the license at the very top level. And this is what I mean about software reuse in today's day and age. How and why and what kind of clashing licenses are we going to have at the top level versus all the nested levels? So if you have any AMA licenses, my official thing is IANAL. I am not a lawyer, but I do know that our lawyers are looking into this and how to go about it, because part of the reason why we want to evaluate a package to use is we get often a license. Can we use it? Is it a compatible license? Sometimes with enterprise, they have strict rules about what you can use and what you can't use. And we want to make this useful to developers, but we're just not ready. We don't know yet how to figure this out best so that we can maybe find nested levels of licenses. And I think that's the world that we live in today. So let's see if there's anything else that I have. I guess I'll go here. So golang.org. So we've already gotten questions about why is go.dev hosted on go.dev instead of just subsites or subpages on top of golang.org. And so I'll just say right now it's partly because of the functionality that we wanted to add to the package, the Explorer, the package.go.dev, right? So we wanted to integrate it with other resources on go.dev, and we just thought that the package discovery should be part of the journey of learning, evaluating Go. And so that's why. But also, and I talked to the Swedes about this, like, are there any kind of under the hood, inside journey, sausage making that I could share with this group? Because I think this is things that you like. And one of the things that they said was that both the front end and the back end had to be rewritten. So go.org is built on top of Redis. And they wanted to use a more complicated schema when implementing module and versioning support. So the other thing is that godoc.org was not accessible for people with disabilities. And so one of the goals of their designs was to make that in the new iteration for the discovery site. So I'm going to answer a question now. Package.go.org will eventually be replacing. Package.go.dev will be replacing go.org. So for those of you that have been contributors and have been following the issue repo, that is why you haven't been seeing any commits to it in well over a year. So now you get it. So we also had people that closed out a lot of their own issues, like, now I get it. The other thing that I wanted to say is this site, I can't even, whatever. How do I hotkey back? Anyway, whatever. We're going back to go.dev. So one of the things that I also want to, I think we're trying to figure it out, and I think is a popular question, and I wanted to answer was, go.org was part of the open source project, right? It's in the /x/tools repository, and this is an open source. And we get a lot of questions like, are you going to open source this? We really would love to use this as a private documentation server in the same way that we could with go.org. So are you going to open source it? And my answer to you is we're evaluating. We really would like to see if we can. We're working with compliance and open source at Google. And we also would love for you to write in and say, this is the use case for my company for why we would need this to be able to run a private documentation server on our on-premise or wherever we are. So I would love for you to continue to write feedback about that. The other sort of side of the question that we've already gotten a lot of questions, the other side of the open source, are you going to open source it, is people are confused, especially if you are one of the OGs or the original Gophers, or you have been involved in the community for a long time. You probably are already very used to certain feedback channels, right? Those feedback channels are on the GitHub issue repo or on Golang Nuts or on GolangDev or whatever. And now this is a brand new feedback channel, and we're actually telling people on the issue repo to please do it on that feedback channel. And someone made the point, and he's an organizer here, and he's wearing a yellow t-shirt, and I think it's a good point. And he's standing to the left of me, you're right. I don't know, who do you think it is? But anyway, some of the people were like, the cool thing about open source, when it's in the GitHub issue repos, we don't have to bombard you as the Go team with multiple questions because we don't know who else is sending feedback, right? We just want to be able to +1 it. And the answer we have to that is we just wanted to make sure that we could give a private feedback in the first month or so, just in case there were sensitive issues. But I really would love, and this is me showing I don't know this is me as an individual. I do not speak for the Go team, but I do agree to a certain extent that there's something beautiful about open source letting us know who else is having the same issue, right? I mean, Stack Overflow really made a business on this, right? So I talked quite a bit here. Let's see if there's anything else that I really would think or I'm anticipating that you would ask. When will you get a response for feedback? Well, right now the site just launched and we're working through the queue, but we're trying to get a feedback response to you within 1 or 2 days from the people that are building go.dev. The other thing is some companies that really have bet big on Go were not featured in that homepage. Oh, let me can I? What's that? Command L. On a Mac? I don't know. Linux?
What's happened? Is it full screen?
I just want to go back to go.dev. Just Command L.
Split screen or?
I just want to go back one in the browser history with the hotkey instead of having to use my cursor.
Yeah, I think it's a new window. You opened a new window.
Oh, I opened a new window. That's okay.
If you did this, and then you find...
Oh, all right. Yo, good thought.
Just close that one, Antonio. Command W.
Okay, then now
right?
go to dev.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
Sorry for the split
That'd be
screen.
right.
It's okay. Yeah, go.dev. Yeah. You got it?
Sorry,
Why is not?
it's not mirrored. It's on that screen there.
Yeah, it's on not mirrored.
So you just got to go. Oh,
I just wanted to.
Yep.
Yeah,
go for it.
go.dev. Perfect. Hey! How many engineers does it take to open a website? Oh, Chrome tab. Right. So one of the other questions that we get asked is, well, how do I get my company up there, right? How do I get Sainsbury's to talk about their testing up there? And the question, please, I say, do not be shy. Please write us in and say, we would like to get featured. The answer is because there's a lot of NDAs and a lot of legal things that we have to work through, and we've become fast friends with our legal team at Google to be able to do this, to be able to get all the releases that we could. Let's see if there's anything else that I think that I'm trying to anticipate for you, who or what we would want to add. So I'll go back to solutions. Let's use here we go, or rather explore. So on the explore page, and this is entirely because explore. How do these packages get here? Is this random? No, it's not random. And yes, there is an algorithm. And no, we are not open sourcing the algorithm yet, but we're looking at it. So I just wanted to ask that for you. For people who were like, hey, is this a way to get my thing in? All right, so I talked a little bit about this top level site packages. I talked about license detection. Same thing with learning resources. So if you have learning resource, or your online code learning site, or you work for one, or maybe you are a trainer, or maybe there's something on the Learn site and a resource isn't listed, and why isn't that listed? Please write in and say for your consideration. The one thing I will say about learning is that it is intensely individualized. And so it's just like, what's your favorite testing framework, and is there one to rule them all? No, there's no wrong question. It's just a matter of what works best for you. But we're in a bind because often, and one of the biggest constructive criticisms about Go was, when I have to go learn Go or teach other people Go, there's no one single solution. And this is where I kind of go off, and I'm not in product, but I did hear a really good thing about product, which is this Crossing the Chasm. Maybe you've heard of it, yeah, by Geoffrey Moore. And there's bleeding edge adopters. These are our language wonks who just want to talk about any language, and they'll try any language and whatnot. And then you go to early majority, and then you cross a chasm, and then you go to like majority, right? And then late majority. And there's a different mindset between the two. Some of it's because you've been forced to learn Go. You don't want to learn it on your free time. You're not all about learning the next great language. You just have to do a thing to get a job done. And when that happens, you just want the solutions there. You don't want to have to find the solutions and build out your own syllabus and whatever. So a trainer might work for you, or solutions. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to do for Go with guided, curated learning journeys for that kind of mindset, because we want to bring in everyone into the fold. And I think the last question is, how can the community get involved, or user feedback get involved? Continue to give feedback. Do not worry about being too noisy. Some people in this room have given 6 feedback emails already, and we want more. And we appreciate any feedback that you can give, whether that's about the content, whether that's about the process, or whether there's more whys, and also about the future. So that's go.dev. I'm happy, and I really want to thank the Go team, especially in New York, for launching this. This has been a year plus of work to get this to happen, and I think that we can now say that modules, we've sort of closed the circle on all the things that needed to happen in order to make modules a truly usable tool chain for the enterprise. So thank you. I am taking some questions from anybody. Yeah. There's one right in the back over here, and I'm going to have you speak into the microphone so I don't have to try to repeat your question.
Perhaps more a question about Google, but why did Google invent Dart? And why don't they use Go and Flutter?
Why don't they? I know. Yeah, yeah. Any more? Yeah.
On the screen at the moment, it's this kind of like search for package box.
Yeah.
Lots of engineers, they're kind of like finding a package journey might have been Google it or go to one of the awesome Go lists. How do you imagine that kind of, maybe you're looking for a client library to talk to Redis or something, like before you might have started with Google. How do you imagine that journey changing with this? Is this for discovery, or is it more for evaluation after you found what you think you're looking for?
I think it's going to be for both. I think that they wanted this search bar. I think part of the reason why they didn't open source it is because there might be some Google search stuff in there, and they wanted to see how much of that they could share. So yes, for both discovery and for evaluation. Yeah, it's the end. It's hot, and I'm probably very thorough. I don't know.
I have one helper question.
Sure.
I just saw in the last 20 minutes that the developer survey for 2019 has just been.
Oh, amazing. All right. So I want to thank this wonderful survey here for testing. Every year, we have a chance to ask a very broad brush of anybody who is interested in Go or has used Go, and we have one type a year that we do an annual developer survey, and that was launched today, and I really want it to be launched today. Woohoo! So please go to golang.org, and in the blog.golang.org you're going to find the survey. And every year it's grown. Last year we had a little over 7,000 or 6,000 responses. We would like more. And really it's to get a sense of who our Go user base is, or who people who haven't used Go but might want to use Go at companies, and what's stopping them from doing it. So if you could take time and share this wide and far, give it to people who have like virally said, I hate Go, so that we can also understand why that's happening. So we want to get everybody, we want to hear everybody's feedback. This is the only one time a year that we do it. We do come to smaller meetups like this, and we ask people one-to-one. We get smaller sample sizes to get thoughts about things, but this is the only very wide survey that we use to be able to dive into things. So please, thank you for that. That's the plug for that. We really hope that you find go.dev useful. We find that your decision makers at your companies, your tech leads, your managers also might find it useful. If they find it not useful, have them write feedback. Maybe, I don't know if you can get them to do that, but that was our intent. So thank you, everybody. Happy birthday, Go. I think that we have either Van or Paul to announce something. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Carmen.
Yeah.